A Step into the Past Volume 15 Chapter 8. Book 15 Chapter 08, Joining Company and Journeying Together. As the morning broke the next day, the two ladies rose early and emerged from the tent. Xiang Xiaolong was exhausted from the hard work of killing and repelling wolves all night, so he slept until noon before crawling out of bed. While he was still washing his face and combing his hair, a guest arrived. This person had a dignified face and large ears, appearing formidable. He was dressed in a warrior's outfit, displaying outstanding skill that must have been the result of a lifetime's training. His left arm was bound up, evidence of the last night's battle with the wolves. When he found out that Xiang Xiaolong was the leader, the man hurried forward and said, "Your humble servant is Zhuang Kong. What is the hero's honorable name? I was criticized by my madam for not asking after benefactor's name last night. I have come to apologize humbly this morning." Xiang Xiaolong saw that, as before, he still hadn't revealed his status and origins, but at least he now knew there were womenfolk in his company. He was astounded, and said, "Elder brother, since you do not wish to reveal your status and origins, why come up to ask after ours? Why don't we treat each other as strangers who met by chance, and go our separate ways?" Zhuang Kong did not expect Xiang Xiaolong to be so direct as to point out the deliberate concealment of his origins and felt embarrassed. He was nonetheless an extraordinary person also, and shamefully said, "Benefactor is right to rebuke me. Regretfully I am under strict orders from my madam not to freely reveal her identity. However, since I have met Benefactor, I am delighted. Would Benefactor be willing to allow your humble servant to ask Madam for instructions? I will see Benefactor again." At this point Ji Yanran and Zhao Ji emerged from the forest hand in hand and returned to the camp. Zhuang Kong stared at them in a daze, obviously not believing that he would get to see such unmatched beauties in such a place. Xiang Xiaolong laughed, "This matter can be avoided. We have pressing matters at hand and need to leave immediately. Let's leave it at that. Here's wishing brother Zhuang and your madam a smooth journey." Zhuang Kong was shocked, withdrew his gaze and earnestly asked, "Is Benefactor going through the Chu border?" Ji Yanran. The two ladies saw Xiaolong talking to him and could guess what was happening. They stood to one side and listened attentively. Xiang Xiaolong stared blankly, "Isn't this the route to Hanzhong County? It should still be Qin's territory." Zhuang Kong was startled and pointed out, "I'm afraid Benefactor has lost his way. These are the spines of the Qinling mountain range. To reach Hanzhong and Nanyang counties, you need to skirt Chu's border for 5 days even if you have the correct directions. Your humble servant has traversed the route twice and am definitely not mistaken." Xiang Xiaolong couldn't help cursing Dubai in his heart. He would have caught up to Teng Yi 10 days ago if he had not been compelled by Dubai's men to abandon his route. He has instead ended up in this accursed place. Thinking about the hard journey behind, he did not have the courage to turn back. He had better continue towards the Chu border before thinking about how to meet up with Teng Yi. He signed, "Are you guys going towards Chu too?" Zhuang Kong replied, "Indeed so. If Hero does not mind, let us join company and journey together. It is good to have people to talk to along the way." Xiang Xiaolong guessed that the other party must have been frightened by the pack of wolves the night before. After muttering to himself for a while, he asked, "How big is your party?" Zhuang Kong replied, "Aside from the madam, there are 5 women and 1 child, and including your humble servant, 15 servants." Xiang Xiaolong thought about all the wrong turns and wasted miles he would have had to walk if he did not have Zhuang Kong as a guide. He also figured that if they parted ways immediately after leaving the Qinling Mountains, his party would not be overly burdened. He finally nodded his head in agreement. Zhuang Kong was so happy that he forgot all about asking for Xiang Xiaolong's identity and origins. They arranged to meet at the bottom of the slope in a short while. Zhuang Kong then hurried away. Ji Yanran smiled and drew near, saying, "From this guy's style of clothing and accent, we can be sure that he is a Chu nobleman. Hubby had better be careful." Xiang Xiaolong said, "For the time being, I shall be known as Xiang Ran. You will be my first wife and Ji will be the second. This trip to Chu is for business. Even if they do not believe us, it will be difficult for them to discern the truth. By the time Xiang Xiaolong's party had decamped and led the horses down the hill, Zhuang Kong's group of 15 men, 5 women, and 1 child had already assembled and were waiting respectfully. There were a few wounded amongst the 15 servants, 2 of whom had wolf claw marks on their necks and faces, causing trepidation to onlookers. On inspection, besides Zhuang Kong, there were at most 2 others who could barely be classified as experts. Most of the women were wearing cloaks and had their faces covered with muslin veils. Even though one could see a vague outline of their faces, it was indistinct. The 2 women who did not cover their faces were as thick and solid as bulls, and while they could not be regarded as ugly, were exceedingly plain. The other 3 women all had graceful postures, and one could tell that they were noble women from a single glance. Under the semi-transparent muslin, they exuded a sort of hazy and mysterious yet beautiful charm. One of the women was especially tall. She also appeared to be the eldest, aging just above 30. From appearances, she had to be Zhuang Kong's madam. The child, on the other hand, had pretty delicate features and a pair of spirited eyes. He looked like he was between 11 and 12 years old. On meeting Xiang Xiaolong and his party, he opened his curious eyes and sized them up. The 5 women bowed on seeing them, their eyes falling on Ji Yanran. The madam spoke first, saying, "Your servant's husband is named Zhuang. Your servant will not forget hero's assistance and benevolence last night even when old, but does not yet know the hero's honorable name. Please enlighten so that your servant can engrave it in the heart and mind." Xiang Xiaolong arrived in front of her and returned the courtesy. He laughed, saying, "My humble self is named Xiang Ran. These 2 are my wives. I'm on this trip to try my luck in Chu. Looking to see if I can obtain some high-quality gold. Didn't think that we would lose our way. However, if we did not lose our way, we would not have met Madam and your noble family. Is this little boy your esteemed son?" Madame Zhuang scrutinized Xiang Xiaolong from behind her veil, saying, "Indeed he is my son Zhuang Baoyi. The other 2 ladies are your servants' 3rd and 4th younger sisters Yukui and Yuning. The rest are my family servants." The other 2 ladies shyly rose as one. Madame Zhuang's gaze fell on Ji Yanran's face, seeming to think of something, but kept the thoughts hidden, merely saying, "It's hard to believe that the wild wolves around the mountain are so heroic and unafraid of people. We had prepared defenses but almost had a calamitous brush with the wolves. It was fortunate that Hero relieved the siege. Now that Hero is traveling with us, we are very much relieved." Xiang Xiaolong noticed the time of the day, smiled and said, "We woke up late today. We should set off immediately." As Madame Zhuang nodded her head, Zhuang Kong hurriedly ordered horses to be brought forward and helped Madame Zhuang, her sisters, and her son to get mounted. Even though he was still young, this Zhuang Baoyi was as stable as Mount Taishan on horseback, without any fear. Everyone then started to descend the mountain. Zhuang Kong was indeed not bragging. He really knew the route well, saving Xiang Xiaolong's party much time and effort. Nonetheless, the 3 ladies and child required guides to lead their horses, hence they progressed slowly. This was unavoidable after all. The 2 parties did not make conversation on the road. Only that Zhuang Kong kept pointing out the directions and the landmarks en route, causing Xiang Xiaolong to have the pleasurable feeling of being in a tour group. When they encamped at night, Madame Zhuang's party retreated to their tents to eat their dinner, presenting even less of a chance for conversation. They proceeded like this for 5 days, until they set eyes on the Chu border. That night, they encamped to rest as usual. Xiang Xiaolong and Ji Yanran, his 2 wives, together with the guardians, surrounded the campfire, roasting the hunted game and engaging in cheerful banter. Zhuang Kong and his party stayed at the other end of the camp eating their dry rations, having declined Xiang Xiaolong's courtesy invitation. The full moon in the middle of the sky cast a golden hue on the surrounding mountainous landscape. The snowy peaks in the distance shimmered mysteriously. In time they heard the howl of the wolves, and couldn't help but feel that the tranquil and placid mountain and fields were nonetheless surrounded by danger. To lighten her husband's burden, Zhao Ji pointed out, after we cross 2 more mountains, we will step into the plains. Isn't it exciting? I wished it was morning already. Ji Yanran sidled up to Xiang Xiaolong and softly said, the other party is nervous. Xiang Xiaolong looked over to Zhuang Kong's party. Sure enough, while they remained silent, they were a little fidgety. He nodded his head in agreement, but could he think of anything else to say? Since the other party already refused to divulge anything, it was useless to ask. Moreover, once they reached the Chu border, they would be too busy with their own business to worry about somebody else's. At this point, a burst of howling appeared nearby. Wu Guang turned to Jing Shan and laughed, saying, your old friends are here again. Do not be merciful when you execute, if not they will use their teeth to be intimate with you. Jing Qi's expression darkened, saying, I think the wolf pack is here for revenge. Jing Shan also frowned silently. Wu Yan was puzzled, asking, do you really think that wolves are like humans, able to hold grudges? Jing Qi replied, there is nothing fantastic about this. Horses have their nature, recognizing their masters. Wolves have their nature, knowing their enemies. What's so strange about this? Zhao Ji is the least courageous, and worriedly said, in that case you guys should quickly think of a way to deal with them. Xiang Xiaolong is also alarmed because even though they have camped on a platform beside a cliff, the other 3 sides were slopes with dense trees. If a few tens or a few hundreds of the wolves were to break through, it would be no laughing matter. If only he had a heavy machine gun. Wu Shu, who was the wisest and most cool-headed of the guardians, smiled saying, we do not dare to disobey Second Madam's command. Could we nonetheless fill our stomachs to regain our energy before going to work? Zhao Ji pouted and complained to Xiang Xiaolong, Wu Shu, this little kid is trying to play punk with Moi. Ji never said that he could not eat. Xiang Xiaolong laughed out loud saying, that sheep's leg is going to be burnt soon, quickly take it down and put it on the plate. As long as my 2 wives have something to eat, all will be forgiven. Ji Yanran playfully said, is Ji a glutton? You have maligned her so. I want to seek justice on her behalf. They passed the time like that. After dinner, Jing Shan and the rest went to deploy animal traps in good spirits, seeming only to fear that the wolves would not come, causing everyone to be happy and in good humor. Ji Yanran, the 2 ladies also joined in the fun. Ironically, it was Xiang Xiaolong who managed to steal some free time. He sat in front of the fire staring blankly and lost in thought. Past events and the future, likes and dislikes all flitted through his mind. At this moment, Madame Zhuang opened her tent, came out and sauntered towards Xiang Xiaolong. She was dressed in a plain white jacket, a white cloak and a hat with an inlaid pearl. With her veil down, she looked like a beautiful spirit from the netherworld. Xiang Xiaolong was a little startled and continued gazing at her. Only when she arrived at his side, greeted him and sat down did he open his mouth to ask, is Madame Zhuang unable to sleep? Since she was close enough for him to smell her breath and since she was under the glare of the fire, the veil was no longer effective. He saw that the silhouette of her face was elegant, graceful, and beautiful. Though her beauty was not as soul-shaking as Qin Qing's, she was a still rare beauty. Her bright and intelligent eyes, reflecting the bright and flickering bonfire, gazed at Xiang Xiaolong. She suddenly sighed faintly, my heart is troubled, so how can I fall asleep? After all this while, this is the first time that Xiang Xiaolong has talked to her up close. It was a new sensation for him. He nodded and said, Madam does not need to reveal her matters to my humble self. Madame Zhuang noticed that he was looking at her face intently and softly asked, is Hero able to see your servant's appearance? Xiang Xiaolong was slightly embarrassed and said, at this angle and under the light, I can more or less see a little. In his heart, he felt that these words carried a hint of romance intent. Was she trying to seduce him to do something for her? This Madame Zhuang reminded him of Lady Ping Yuan and Empress Jing in that they were all mature and older beauties. They were no longer as pure as young maidens but were instead extremely practical. They knew how to use themselves and their beauty to accomplish their objectives. Madame Zhuang lowered her head and continued saying, "Is Hero really on this trip to Chu to look for gold?" Xiang Xiaolong did not expect her to be so perceptive and direct. He did not dare hesitate, and replied, "Men die for wealth, birds die for food. If not for gold, why would I weary myself with the long and difficult journey?" Madame Zhuang pondered these two wise sentences, "Men die for wealth, birds die for food," silently for a good while before raising her head again to say, "Hero Xiang's words are poetic and meaningful. Definitely an extraordinary man. Moreover, your two elegant and beautiful wives are second to none, and not one person in your household is not an expert. Should I believe that you are bustling all over for something as trivial as wealth?" Xiang Xiaolong refused to admit it, replied, "How can gold be a trivial matter? Madam must be joking." From behind her veil, Madame Zhuang stared at him without blinking and said unhurriedly, "Since this is the case, as long as Hero Xiang escorts us to Yunnan, I will thank Hero with 1,000 taels of gold. Your servant is prepared to swear a fell oath, and will definitely keep her word." Xiang Xiaolong was shocked, recalling Ji Yanran's discourse about how Chu was thwarted in its eastern invasion and was compelled to expand southwestwards. The protagonist was one great General Zhuang, who shared the same family name as Madame Zhuang's husband. Later, when Chu's power waned, that Zhuang together with the vassal states attempted to take over the throne. Could it be that Zhuang was the king of Yunnan? After recovering from his shock, he said unenthusiastically, "Is Madame related to the king of Yunnan in some way?" Madame Zhuang softly replied, "The former king is my father-in-law." Xiang Xiaolong figured that this was another fight for the throne, and another royal tragedy. He lost the mood to listen further. He gasped, "Madame's suggestion is indeed tempting, but this 1,000 taels of gold is too difficult to earn. Moreover, I am not willing to endanger my two lovely wives who are only on this try for sightseeing. Please forgive me, for the heart is willing but the body is weak." Madame Zhuang also signed, and gently said, "Xiang Xiaolong has the backing of the Wu family, how can he be interested in 1,000 taels of gold?" Xiang Xiaolong laughed bitterly, "So you already knew who I was, yet toyed with me deliberately." Madame Zhuang giggled, "A person of your appearance and body shape cannot be found amongst 10,000 men. The talented Lady Ji is even more difficult to pass off. You are both so famous all over, your servant finds it strange that Mr. Xiang thought he could fool all of us." Again she smiled and said, "If you were some common man, your servant might have used her body to buy your favor, but I know that this would not be effective on you. Why don't we openly strike a mutually profitable deal instead?" Xiang Xiaolong had an uneasy feeling. This Madame Zhuang did not only have Lady Ping Yuan and Empress Jing's qualities, she also had Zhao Ye's smartness that was not afraid of opposition, causing him to be provoked. He took a deep breath, collected his mind, and said, "Honestly, I do not know what you can use to trade with me." Madame Zhuang had a card up her sleeves, said, "This trip to Chu, is Mr. Xiang after Li Yuan or Tian Dan? If it's the latter, I do not fear that you will refuse to deal with me." Xiang Xiaolong was momentarily stunned and tongue-tied. He knew that although many people knew about his plan to attack Tian Dan, it was limited to a small circle of people in the royal family and the military in Xianyang. How did this Madame Zhuang know this secret? Madame Zhuang softly said, "If Mr. Xiang knew that Lady Huiyang is my aunt, he would not be so surprised." Xiang Xiaolong took a deep breath and said, "Did Madame come from Xianyang?" Madame Zhuang refused to answer, and said, "Could Mr. please tell me whether this trip is due to Tian Dan? If the answer is not, then your servant does not have the necessary means to do business with Mr. It would then be best to drop this matter." Xiang Xiaolong tried to discern with his heart. Her tone seemed to suggest that she knew something about Tian Dan. He could not help being startled, gasping, "Madame is formidable. Please continue your discourse. Madame Zhuang happily said, your servant trusts that Mr. is an upright nobleman. Once he knows your servant's secret, even if he does not accept the deal, he would not reveal the secret. Is this the case? Xiang Xiaolong bitterly laughed. Don't tell me that I, Xiang Xiaolong, will harm you women and children. Madame Zhuang's spirit was roused. The reason I know so many secrets is all because I have an agent amongst Li Yuan's confidants. Mr. should understand now. Xiang Xiaolong suddenly realized that Madame Zhuang was herself from Chu, was also Zhuang's daughter-in-law and what's more was Lady Huiyang's close relative. For one of the spies from her intelligence system to infiltrate Li Yuan's confidants was not unreasonable. No wonder she knew that he wanted to deal with Tian Dan. Madame Zhuang smiled. Could Mr. Xiang lift your servant's veil? Your servant wants to tell you an unfathomable secret face to face. Xiang Xiaolong frowned and said, Madam belongs to another man, I am afraid that it would be improper for me to do so. Madame Zhuang sadly said, my late husband has already been beheaded by the rebel army in the chaos 5 years ago. Your servant does not belong to anyone presently. Why else would I flee my home village and go to Qin? If not for Lady Huiyang's protection, your servant would have been captured by the Chu people long ago. Xiang Xiaolong heaved a sigh and lifted her veil. A face that was half happy and half angry, and filled with the charm of a mature beauty appeared before him. Her jade-like face was a little too long, but matched perfectly with her slender and graceful swan-like neck, producing a uniquely attractive charm. In addition, she had a cute little mole on her lower jaw that balanced the whole package to perfection. Her eyes were indeed bright and intelligent, causing men's hearts to race. Even though she did not have Qinqing's classical beauty, she had the audacity and wild nature that Qinqing lacked, causing men to want to bed her impulsively. No wonder she needed to veil her face. Madame Zhuang saw him sizing her up unabashedly and was pleased, drawing back her shyness, said, Mr. thinks that your servant's appearance is pleasing. Xiang Xiaolong mentally put on his guard. While she insisted from the beginning that she had no intention of seducing him, she was actually doing so. Yet it was difficult to fault her. For a frail woman like her to return to her home country to help her son ascend the throne, besides relying on the gifts that heaven has bestowed on her, what else could she rely on? One could imagine from the time she left her country till today how many times she had used her beautiful body to barter for help from men. He couldn't help but sigh again. Madam does not need to lower herself. You have not yet revealed the big secret. A look of amazement flitted across Madame Zhuang's eyes. She softly said, only till now do I understand why even the widow Qing finds it difficult to restrain herself with Mr. A person's words reveals his inner cultivation. From Mr.'s restrained words, I can tell that Mr. is extraordinary. Xiang Xiaolong silently admitted his shame, forced a bitter laugh and said, returning to one's country is a serious matter, Madam had better not fall for me. You might cause trouble to yourself. Madame Zhuang covered her mouth in an enchanting smile, saying, you have confidence in yourself. Why should you be afraid of other people's admiration? Even to the point of warning us off, AI. Nobody will believe that in this world there really exists a man like you who is afraid of women's affections. The more Xiang Xiaolong interacts with this Madame Zhuang, the more he is enticed by her. At this moment, he realized that Zhuang Kong and his party had gone to the slopes to help out, leaving the two of them single man and woman alone at the space outside the tents. Secretly alarmed, he turned serious and said, your servant is listening intently. Madame Zhuang restrained her smile and softly said, Tian Dan has already returned to the Chu capital Shaochun. Xiang Xiaolong shook uncontrollably. What? Madame Zhuang leisurely explained, as Tian Dan has enemies everywhere both inside and outside of Chu, he has an identical stand-in that follows him everywhere. Once he realized that you were not willing to let him go, he hid himself amongst Li Yuan's troops and departed. The person you saw thereafter was his stand-in. Xiang Xiaolong was covered in cold sweat. No wonder Tian Dan kept such a low profile during the hunt and tried his best to avoid attending the public events. To think this was the reason. He knew he was short by one move in this game of chess and could not defeat the old fox. He needed to notify Teng Yi and Su Yiluan immediately to prevent them from being wiped out by a Chu counterattack. Once he thought about this, he lost the mood for anything else. He has now failed completely and needs to write his name backwards. Suddenly Madame Zhuang's face seemed to get bigger. While he was still in a daze, Madame Zhuang approached and kissed him lightly on the lips before sitting back, saying, "As long as you help me return to my country, I will help you kill Tian Dan." Xiang Xiaolong woodenly said, "You are powerless to defend yourself, how can you help me?" Madame Zhuang solemnly said, "This villain Li Ling is able to murder his master and betray his country only because of Qin Xiaolai's support in the background. Now that King Xiaolai is dead, there are many people in Shaochun and Yunnan who support us. Circumstances have changed entirely. If not, how would I dare to return to Chu?" Xiang Xiaolong recovered from his shock and said, "Did you also obtain the news of King Xiaolai's death from Li Yuan?" Madame Zhuang replied, "Of course not. Our family's roots in Chu are deep. Zhuang Kong came to us from the faraway Chu precisely to inform us and to bring us back." Xiang Xiaolong almost lost his voice, said, "What? King Xiaolai is really dead?" Madame Zhuang looked at him uncomprehendingly. Xiang Xiaolong could not stop shuddering. It was hard to believe that his scheme had accidentally helped Li Yuan rush back in time to seize power. Otherwise Li Yuan would still be in Xianyang. This matter was so strange as to exceed everyone's expectations. After taking a deep breath, he said with resolve, "If I can kill Tian Dan, I will use all my strength to help your son take hold of the throne."